Hey everybody, Taz from Critical Thinking Anarchist here. All right, this is going to be a lot shorter than I was originally planning on. We'll see how much I end up actually recording here. Um, it's a 2 hour and 7 minute interview for this Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin. It's a really good interview, but there is a reason that I really never watched any world leader interviews. Um, I just don't know what to get from these things. So anyway, if you want, you can either go to tuckercarlson.com, and this particular interview is for free. He left it for free. Or you can go to Twitter and see it on his profile and whatnot. So um, it's a good interview. For the first, it's kind of interesting because for the first half hour or so, Putin talks about about the history of Russia and the Ukraine and that whole entire area, and he's given Tucker a history lesson on the area, and it's kind of cool. It does kind of lead up to like this area is ancestrally Russian. It's not Ukrainian. Ukraine didn't exist until relatively recently, until the fall of the Soviet Republic, the USSR. And Tucker's like, well, I mean, like, should we all go back to, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago to ancestral boundaries? Is that what you're saying? And Putin's like, you can make a case. I'm like, he's like, if you work hard enough, you can make a case for all of that. And it is kind of an interesting take, and especially since that is essentially one that the Jews use for Israel, right or wrong, whether you believe that or not. That's neither here nor there. It's just kind of that same take there. So it was kind of an interesting argument, and I thought it was very thoughtful. And I will say that for the entire interview is Putin is incredibly thoughtful, incredibly knowledgeable. Tucker did a really good job, quite a bit on he didn't just it was not a softball interview by any means, but of course it's tough because you do have the language barrier. So you've got Tucker asking questions, Putin responding, Tucker waiting for each of them waiting for the translations during it all. So it's not a super quick back and forth when it comes to that. But at any rate, a lot of the questions were surrounding, of course, the Ukraine and what can be done. Putin did say, that they did have very good negotiations. They were almost completed. Like, paperwork was there, ready to be signed, and then because of pressure from the West, that it didn't get signed between NATO, the European Union, and the United States. People were pushing buttons, and the negotiations with Ukraine stopped. Like, he was saying, it's like we had a meeting set up ready to go. Like, they were right there, and then it got pulled off the table last minute. So there were a lot of questions, of course, again, surrounding that. That was probably about somewhere between half to 2/3 of the interview. There were a couple other thoughtful questions, Tucker being a fairly out Christian, fairly blatant, asked Putin, how do you reconcile being a world leader who sometimes has to make decisions on people being killed? And how do you reconcile that with being Christian, where Christianity is one of the few religions that very specifically teaches do not kill, do not harm another person? Now, it's, of course, New Testament, not Old Testament. But even still, and Putin's like, hey, he's like, we're not attacking anybody. He's like, this is a conflict that started longer ago than people realize. He's like, there was a coup d'etat, and it was the coup d'etat that started all of this. He's like, this is retaliatory. This is not an aggressive act. We didn't aggress upon Ukraine. We were aggressed upon first, and we are protecting ourselves. He did state that it was kind of interesting. He's like, he had a really good. He apparently he really admired George W. Bush. He had a really good relationship with George W. Bush. He said he even, of course, had a fairly good relationship with Trump, but he has almost zero relationship with Biden. He said, he's willing to talk, he's willing to be there. He's like, but Biden has not kept up any sort of communication. But he was very thoughtful on this. He's like, that is not to say that I don't have contact with people in there. He's just saying he doesn't have contact with Biden. But he has quite a bit of contact with the administration, just not Biden himself. Which, as most people know, as most people realize, there's always contact going on within governments. Various levels of government. You've got ambassadors, you've got senators, you got other legislators who are, have their own contacts and are talking to people and are exchanging information. So, I mean, if you've got 2 hours, it is a worthwhile interview to listen to. For me, it was tough. Again, typically, I don't find world leader conversations very interesting. I was engaged this entire time, but I didn't hear answers that I was expecting. But then again, Putin very measured in his responses. So he was, I keep saying thoughtful. He understands the questions for the most part that are being asked of him, and he sometimes turned it right around on Tucker and said, "Go ask your own leadership." He's like, "That's not my place to say. Go ask your own leadership." But essentially, kind of saying, I could give you an answer, but that's the answer from the opposition. You're probably not going to believe me. Why don't you ask your own leaders what's going on? Let's see what they say. But again, if you have a couple hours, and there's plenty of people summarizing this, and they're going to summarize it way better than I can. Go ahead, listen to them. Definitely listen to the interview yourself. Watch the interview. It is dubbed. So you don't have to sit there and read subtitles. Putin's answers are dubbed from Russian into English. So, you can do it while you're doing other things. If you're that type of person. Normally I am, and I was kind of doing other things during this, but for the most part, I was able to watch most of it because it was interesting seeing Putin's body language on that. And again, all the things that he kind of said and the responses and the way he gave his responses of, sometimes it's kind of like, I know more than I'm letting on. I know more than I'm letting on, but I'm only going to say this much. And other times he kind of said, I know your leaders are going to watch this, and I don't want them to think I care about them more than I do, which is, again, an interesting way to go about it. So I loved it. It is a masterclass in journalism, in actual good journalism, and it was a really great world leader interview. Again, it just didn't hold my interest very much, which is why I'm not going on too much further about it. So anyway, in the meantime, once again, I apologize that I didn't get ISOM 2 Part 2 on here this week. That will be going up next week. But in the meantime, let me know what you thought. Leave your comments below, and I will talk to you next time.